You're listening to a CNA podcast. It's called Kiribati, a country that bills itself as an undiscovered island paradise. It's made up of 33 separate islands in the central Pacific Ocean. Only 20 of those atolls are inhabited. And like many other island countries today, Kiribati is in a fight for survival. Rising sea levels and global warming mean this low-lying nation could soon disappear. Jack Board is CNA's climate change correspondent and also co-host of the Climate Conversations podcast. He ventured out to Kiribati to find out why neighbor Fiji may play a crucial part in its future. Hey, Jack, great to have you on again.
Hey, Teresa. Always good to be with you.
I have a confession to make. I don't know much about Kiribati. It's mysterious to me. In fact, I wasn't even pronouncing it correctly. I'm kind of embarrassed. But if you see how it's spelled on paper, it looks like Kiribati, right? But it's not pronounced that way.
Yep, totally. And it's, you don't have to be embarrassed that you don't know much about this country. I'll admit to you, I didn't know that much either. Of course, we do a lot of research for our stories, right? Mm-hmm. And I'll also admit that I'm a bit of a geography nerd. So I do like to know where all countries are, what are the capital cities. Even when I was a kid, I was like this. But I used to have this poster on my wall growing up with all of the flags of the world. Oh. And I always remember the Kiribati flag.
Oh,
I don't know
way.
if you've seen it. It's so beautiful. It must be the nicest flag of the entire world. It's like this yellow frigate bird flying over the rising sun with these beautiful waves. So yeah, I was always kind of into Kiribati just because of its flag. But, there are real climate reasons for, extending some of our coverage to the Pacific region. I think we hear about them all the time. When there are big climate summits, negotiations, we hear from Pacific nations, but it's not a very well understood region to many of us. So I thought it was really important that we actually go and understand the problems that are being faced by these countries firsthand. And we were looking for 3 different countries to profile, and Kiribati was one of them.
Okay, so you went there. How difficult is it to get there, though? Because like I said, there are dozens of separate islands. What's the airport situation like?
Look, in the scheme of things, it's actually pretty okay. The capital, Tarawa, is connected to Nadi in Fiji. And in the Pacific, everything is connected through Fiji. So it's like your Singapore or your Dubai or your Chicago in terms of regional connectivity. It's like this hub now. And the flight to Tarawa is actually on a large commercial plane. It's a 737 MAX 8, pretty new, nice. It's a 3-hour flight across the Pacific, a pretty scenic flight, some 2,000 kilometers. But having said all that, it does feel like you're really flying into a distant frontier. And to kind of play up my geography nerd levels again, and I described it in the story this way, it is a geographical curiosity. This is a country that is spread over all 4 hemispheres.
Wow.
It's the first country to usher in the new year. So when we see the fireworks on TV from around the world, Kiribati is
the first ones.
Yeah, the first ones. And it's a massive country. It's all these little dots in the ocean. But if all of their ocean territory was land, it would actually be about the size of India. So
no way.
It's a really spread out, huge country.
Okay. So the World Health Organization, they say that Kiribati is one of the world's most vulnerable countries to climate change. So when you were there and you were talking to locals, did you get a sense of how dire things are? And do the locals even know themselves?
Yeah, of course they do. They're intimately aware that the world is changing. They see it, they feel it. They may not be reading the scientific literature, but they feel it every single day. And I think it's what's important to understand about a problem like sea level rise, which is what they're facing, and kind of climate change in general, is it's not like the waves are just all of a sudden going to swallow up this place and it's going to disappear. Mm-hmm. This is a slow-moving crisis that cuts across so many aspects of life. Just the way that people are living every day. They're feeling all these little paper cuts. Like the fishermen who go out every day and suddenly the fish that they're trying to catch aren't there anymore. They need to travel further. They need to spend more on petrol. Or the regular people who are just trying to keep their house from being flooded every week, and they're building up a seawall. Like, people are literally building their own seawalls to protect their house, protect their community. And then these waves also impact water. Is water safe to drink? Is there enough? Can I bathe in the water? Is it safe to bathe my young child? Can I grow food like I used to grow it? Can I have fruit in my back garden? Is the infrastructure going to collapse? Is the road going to have a big hole in it that's going to delay me getting to work? And then you have all these people who live on the outer islands of Kiribati, and they just can't live there anymore. So they're looking for opportunities. They're moving to the ever-crowded main island, which is South Tarawa. And there's not enough resources to go around, and the poverty is really striking there. The population is under strain. I spoke to a woman named Kamoya. She's running a local NGO, especially catering towards women and older women in Tarawa. So take a listen to what she had to say, especially around the situation with water.
Water is the main problem because water now is not safe to drink, not safe to cook, and especially for the women to bath and clean themselves. We're trying to adapt because before, climate change doesn't exist in the US. That's our understanding. But now we know it's there, and we know there's a great problem affecting us.
It's such a challenge, and one possible solution, it seems extreme, Jack, but it's out there, and that is to move all 130,000 residents to Fiji, another piece of land, another country entirely. Where did this idea come from? Could it really work?
Yeah, you're right. It does sound like a really extreme
It's crazy.
plan. Yeah, but it was government policy. In 2014, the president at the time, his name was Teresa Tang, he announced that the Kiribati government would purchase an estate in Fiji, I think a 2,200 hectare piece of undeveloped coastal land. And the government paid for it, something like $9 million US. And it was part of this policy at the time of migration with dignity. If we have to move somewhere, let's have a plan. Let's have an alternative homeland for our people. And in many ways, the land was conceived to be used in different ways. Even if it wasn't going to house everyone immediately, it could grow food, for example, for the population. But he lost the next election. He's currently in Kiribati under house arrest for political reasons. And the current government has sort of done away with that policy altogether. And they're choosing to stay and fight instead in Kiribati. And I actually went to the estate in Fiji. I was like pretty curious to like go and see what it's like. Mm-hmm. It's really hard to find. It's in a really remote part of Fiji. It's beautiful. It's a stunning piece of land. You can see
what's there,
why.
though? Is it just land?
It's empty land.
It's empty
totally
land,
empty.
yeah.
There were some people there who were growing fruit in a neighboring estate. It's not being used at all. And it has these beautiful trickling streams, and it has a beautiful view with, coral reefs and coconut trees. But it's still there. It's still a backup plan, I guess, if things go south. The discussion in Kiribati around this policy is contentious. I spoke to Pelanisa Lofa. She's a long-time climate activist. She's a veteran in this space. And she said that, look, both options should be on the table, moving or staying. But I got a sense that it's not an open discussion right now. Have a listen to what she had to say.
The reality is this: we can have both. We can talk about both. Mm-hmm. There's nothing wrong about staying. There's nothing wrong about living. Mm-hmm. But if you want to live, that's why we say, if you want to live with dignity. If you want to stay with dignity. I cannot see us living at this time. I'm still trying to adapt, and our work is to say, no, we are not drowning. We will fight this problem. And we are fighting it right here on this land.
Pelanise there, she talks about staying with dignity, and that's a phrase you used as well. How do these people do that, though? How do they build climate resilience in the communities they're currently living in?
Yeah, there are different aspects, I guess, to living with dignity, and it's something that we all want, right? Any community wants to live with dignity, regardless of the challenges that we face. So it's basic economics. It's having food on the table. It's having safe water to drink and bathe with, as I mentioned, job opportunities. And then it's safety and shelter from the fast-warming planet. And that last part is connected to what we call climate adaptation, which is the ability to prepare for and adjust for the impacts that you or your community are feeling. And in Kiribati, that's really complex and it's really expensive, it seems, to gain the dignity that the people are seeking. And they've tried so many different ways to achieve it. As I mentioned, around seawalls, that's just a small part of your day, like to not have water coming into your home. Have some dignity where you can feel comfortable and safe. And so people have been building their own seawalls. That's not really working. You know, walking around Tarawa, you can see them everywhere in various states of disrepair, various types of materials that people are using. Some are more formal structures that have obviously been paid for by development banks or the like. Some are just shells. And then, you know, they also need major engineering. At least that's the policy of this current government. They have quite ambitious plans to save Kiribati, you know, lifting roads above the sea. They're talking about dredging large parts of the lagoon to create new land. And all of this is going to cost billions of dollars. I think what Pelanese said to me is that, you know, look, this is possible if wealthy, developed nations with the capabilities, with the money, can help Kiribati with what it needs.
Two things. I always say we need two things, which we don't have. And we need technology and we need funding. Those are the two things that developed countries have. If they have a disaster, they fix it straight away.
Kiribati is in China's orbit. Kiribati cut ties with Taiwan in 2019. They then switched diplomatic recognition to Beijing. And then, you know, what do you know? In a couple of years, they received $160 million in aid from China. You talk about the money that's needed, Jack. How much is Kiribati's relationship with Beijing a lifeline for them?
It's a complicated lifeline, for sure. And previously, yeah, as you've just kind of alluded to, they were politically aligned with Taipei on the global stage. And they formally broke ties in 2019, sort of in favor of establishing a stronger relationship with Beijing. And as you mentioned, what followed was these sort of huge sums of financial support for various things, including infrastructure and for transportation. But when that kind of decision is made, there's also a price to be paid. Okay, sure, they've received money. After that, they also allowed Chinese commercial fishing vessels to utilize this protected area called the Phoenix Island, a really important area for biodiversity. And now you have the Chinese fishing fleet utilizing that area, which was previously not allowed. And this is a trend that we're seeing right across the Pacific. We're also seeing it in many other parts of the world as well, in Africa as well, as an example. Countries that are in need of financing for infrastructure, for disaster relief, for various loans are faced with a quandary, and they're going to partner with those who are most able to assist them. And Beijing has proved to be a willing partner more often than not. And many in Kiribati have criticized this. They called it checkbook diplomacy. It's hard to argue that it's not checkbook diplomacy. But given some of the steep challenges ahead for Kiribati and other countries in this similar situation, you can really see how it happens.
When you describe this country, it sounds so beautiful. And you'd think that tourism would be a moneymaker for it, right? But it's not. It's not a Hawaii. It's not a Maldives. It doesn't get many tourists. And I've read people say you have to rough it when you're there. If it's not tourism, what drives the economy then?
You're right. It is beautiful. I need to tell you, Teresa, like, this is an incredibly beautiful place. It's stunning. And please, like, go and watch my video. My shots don't do it justice. Like, looking at it, you can imagine the potential of tourism here, just like in the Maldives. I think Kiribati gets something like 10,000 tourists a year. It's basically nothing.
Wow.
The Maldives, to compare, gets 5,000 people a day.
Oh my
So
gosh.
right now, the infrastructure just does not exist for tourism at all. The hotels are bad.
Where did you stay? In a hotel?
Yeah, there's a few hotels and mostly, being used by people from the UN and from, development banks and from various governments. South Tarawa, where most of those guest houses are, it's sketchy. Like, to be frank, it's like at night you're told, like, don't leave the hotel.
Oh.
This is one of the poorest countries. Like in Oceania, it's one of the poorest countries in the world. People are living, a lot of them are living below the poverty line. They rely on agriculture typically and fishing, but as I've kind of described to you, like those aspects of life are a struggle now. They do have big tourism plans, and you can see, as I said, you can see the potential there. I'd love to see it take off because, yeah, it's beautiful. But right now, it's not happening.
Mm-hmm. And you have described this fight for Kiribati's survival as all-consuming. For young people, if you are a young person in this country, what are your options? If you stay, what can you do, really?
Yeah, it's really tough for them. And if those industries like tourism don't take off, what options are there for young people there apart from doing what generations have done before them, which is being fishermen or being farmers? And if that's not providing a livelihood for you and your family, it's natural that they're looking at different options. And they also have then this existential crisis that's hanging over them, being told, like, your country may not exist in one generation's time. So many of them are leaving. There are options for them to go to New Zealand or go to Australia, go get a university degree, go have a better life there. They might have family members already living in those countries. So it is a constant draw for them. And I spent like a couple of days with a young guy. His name was Max Tia. He was in his early 20s. He's a young climate activist, sort of finding his feet in the world, I guess. And it was cool to just drive around with him around Tarawa and just try and understand his daily life, his outlook on life. And what really struck me was the difficulty of the decisions that he was being asked to make at a young age, and what felt like if I go, I might not come back because I might lose the connections with my culture. And I think for him, culture was so important that at this point of his life, he's decided, I'm going to stay here and try and preserve this unique culture. Have a listen to what Max had to say.
I think that the young people are scared, and they're feared for the future and for climate change if it's still happening, because they think it will get worse and worse every year. Some really want to stay here, and some, if they get a chance to go abroad for their future, well, who doesn't want a better future? So I hopefully maybe 90% will go there. I think my culture is my first priority and everything, yeah. Without this culture, we won't be known as in the world. So I'd rather stay here. If it's the end of our culture, so I will be there.
Wow, him saying he'd rather stay, even if it means the end of his culture. That's really moving. So Fiji, you said that is a plan B, it seems, at the moment, not really happening. In the meantime, people in Kiribati, they are on the move domestically, right? They're heading to urban parts, like you said. But these parts of the country are becoming more crowded then. So how sustainable is that?
It's not sustainable at all, I would say. Tarawa is crowded. It's dirty. It's loud. There's so much garbage. All of that really surprised me. I would say more than half of the population now lives in urban areas. And that's a really wild statistic for a nation made up of small islands where the concept of urban life and like dense settlements didn't really exist before. So, yeah, many problems come with this ever expansion of the urban space. People's health, child mortality rates are really high. You have waste management problems. There's the lack of water. And we're seeing this globally as well. People are on the move. They're moving away from the land where climate impacts are probably being felt first and hardest. And they're moving to the bright lights of the city, the relative bright lights. And these cities are struggling to cope.
I have to say, I watched your reports. I didn't feel like there was a conclusion. There was definitely no happy ending here. When you boarded your flight, you saw these islands from the window of your plane as you left. What went through your mind? What resonated the most deeply with you?
Look, there's no ending to climate change, right? And I was pretty sad, actually, to leave Kiribati. Not that I wanted to stay, because it was a really challenging experience to be there and to kind of see the challenges that exist for people. The situation really felt quite hopeless. The odds are stacked against the people of Kiribati. And when you visit these impacted communities, not just in the Pacific, but all over, we like to say, like, the local people have so much strength. They have so much resilience. And it's true. Like, their community there is really strong, and people are proud of where they come from. They're proud to be called Kiribati. My deep fear is that strength and resilience is not enough. It's also an excuse that we like to put onto marginalized groups. These threads are being undermined by the climate challenges now that exist, the challenges that lie ahead for them. How long can people like Max hold out? How long before he has no choice but to go elsewhere? And then what does that mean for the people left behind? What does it mean for the Kiribati culture? The world is losing something. It's a unique place with deep connections to those lands, to the histories of those lands, all the stories that go with it and that people shared with me. So yeah, it's a sad and difficult situation. I think it's something that all of us should care about. But I also looked at those blue waters with a bit of awe, incredible place. And there's the potential to save that place and save their home. So I hope that the stories that we do make people a little more interested in the challenges for people in far off places that we don't think about much and ensure that they continue to exist into the future.
Yeah. It's a tough fight, but the hope is there as well. Jack, thanks so much for this.
Thanks a lot, Teresa.
And a reminder that the TV episodes of CNA Correspondent air every Wednesday. You can find them at 9:30 p.m. Singapore, Hong Kong time. You can find Jack's reports on Kiribati and other environmental stories on YouTube, as well as on CNA.Asia. And Jack's busy. He's also co-host of the Climate Conversations podcast, along with Liling Tan. So make sure you check it out. New episodes are out every week. Well, the team behind this week's episode is Saya Win, Clara Ong, Crispina Robert, Craig Dale, and myself, Teresa Tang. Thanks very much for joining us.